Imagine for a second, right, that you're standing in the middle of a room and a dusty, dimly lit 15th century workshop just crashes directly into a sterile, brightly lit rocket manufacturing floor.
Oh, what a visual.
Right? Like you're smelling linseed oil and wood shavings, but you're looking at wooden gears and half-finished oil paintings scattered among, titanium valves and thruster blueprints.
It's a total collision of eras.
Exactly. And that collision is really the foundation of the source material we're dissecting today. We're doing a deep dive into an imagined 30-minute dialogue script written between two iconic figures separated by, over 500 years, Leonardo da Vinci and Elon Musk.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note right up front, the author of this conceptual script didn't just, smash two famous names together for a fun historical fantasy.
No, not at all.
The entire conversation is strictly rooted in the documented methodologies of both men. The goal of this piece, and really our mission in analyzing it, is to extract the architectural framework of their minds.
Let's see how they actually tick.
Right. We are looking at the mechanics of how a Renaissance master and a modern aerospace CEO process extreme complexity, overcome profound adversity, and synthesize knowledge to solve problems that, honestly, most people consider completely impossible.
And if you're listening to this, maybe on your commute or doing the dishes, you might be thinking, look, I am not trying to invent a reusable rocket.
Right. I'm definitely not painting the Mona Lisa.
Exactly. You're like,
Yep.
I'm just trying to get my team to meet a Q3 deadline. But the core mechanisms of how these two minds operate, specifically how they attack a problem by refusing to accept the designated boundaries of that problem, it can literally be applied to any professional or personal bottleneck you are facing right now.
We are fundamentally talking about the universal mechanics of the polymath. And I think modern society tends to view a polymath as just a highly educated trivia champion.
It's
Right?
like someone who just collects degrees.
Yes, someone who happens to hold degrees in disparate fields. But the script illustrates that true polymathy is not about collecting distinct disciplines. It is about deep functional integration.
It's the ability to draw on complex, seemingly unrelated bodies of knowledge to solve one highly specific problem.
Exactly.
And understand how they do that, we have to look at how they structure their daily inputs. Early in the imaginary dialogue, Da Vinci and Musk start comparing their primary tools for thinking. For Da Vinci, it's his legendary notebooks.
The cortices, yeah.
Yeah. And for Musk, it's his reliance on first principles thinking. And at first glance, they sound like opposites, right? Because Da Vinci's notebooks are famously boundaryless. You turn one page, and you find meticulous, groundbreaking anatomical sketches of the human cardiovascular system.
And then the very next page is an engineering diagram for a siege weapon.
Right, followed by paragraphs analyzing the fluid dynamics of river water.
Which, to a modern, hyper-specialized professional, submitting a notebook like that would look like a mental breakdown.
It totally would. HR would have a field day.
They really would. We're trained to compartmentalize. You have your marketing folder, your engineering folder, your HR folder. But Da Vinci's lack of compartmentalization was a deliberate cognitive strategy.
He wasn't just easily distracted.
No, not at all. In the script, Musk actually asks him why he jumps so frantically from anatomy to rivers. And Da Vinci explains that he wasn't studying different subjects. He was studying the universal law of flow and resistance.
Ah, so the river and the veins are literally the same problem to him?
Precisely. Da Vinci observed how water hitting a rock in a river creates a vortex, a swirling eddy that changes the pressure of the water around it.
Okay, yeah.
He took that exact observation from hydrodynamics and applied it to his dissection of the human heart. He hypothesized that blood pumping through the aortic root must hit the walls of the artery and create a similar vortex.
And that swirling pressure is what causes the heart valves to snap shut.
Yes.
Which is wild because that's a fluid dynamics concept that modern cardiologists didn't fully map out and confirm until the 20th century.
It really is incredible.
He used his understanding of a river to solve the invisible mechanics of the human heart. That is just insane. And then the script flips the perspective a bit. Musk counters Da Vinci's sprawling natural analogies with first principles thinking.
Right, which is more of an inward focus.
Exactly. Instead of looking outward at how nature solves a problem, first principles is about looking inward. It's stripping a complex problem down to its most fundamental, indisputable physical truths.
The dialogue uses the cost of rockets as the prime example here. When Musk first looked at Mars, the traditional aerospace industry told him, hey, Rockets cost $65 million, and that's simply the price of admission.
Because a specialized mind just accepts the boundary of that industry standard.
Exactly. But first principles thinking requires you to break the rocket down to its atomic components. Like, what is a rocket actually made of?
Aerospace-grade aluminum, titanium, copper, carbon fiber.
Right. You look at the raw commodity value. If you buy those materials on the London Metal Exchange, what do they actually cost?
Just the metal itself.
Yeah. And it turns out the raw materials are only about 2% of a typical price of a rocket.
Wow. 2%.
So the massive cost isn't a rule of physics, right? It's a failure of the manufacturing process and the supply chain.
By reducing the problem to its fundamental physical truths, you realize the accepted reality is just an inherited assumption. You don't need to invent cheaper titanium. You need to invent a better factory.
Exactly.
It's kind of like cross-training for the brain. Like a weightlifter doesn't do yoga to get better at doing yoga. They do yoga to build flexibility in their stabilizers so they can lift heavier weights on the bench press without snapping a tendon.
That's a great analogy.
They use a completely separate discipline to empower their primary goal. Da Vinci uses hydrology to empower biology. Musk uses fundamental physics to empower manufacturing supply chains.
Functional synthesis. But notice how that fundamentally changes the definition of expertise. They aren't just borrowing a metaphor. They are ripping the load-bearing pillars out of one industry and installing them directly into another.
Okay, I have to push back on this, though. On behalf of anyone who has ever tried to learn, like, coding, conversational Spanish, and sourdough baking all in the same month and just ended up failing miserably at all three.
Which is very relatable.
Right. Doesn't trying to be an expert in physics, art, and engineering just lead to being completely mediocre across the board? It feels like the classic jack of all trades, master of none trap. Every modern productivity book tells us to pick a niche, specialize relentlessly, and outsource the rest.
The jack of all trades trap is totally real, but it applies to dabblers. A dabbler learns just enough about a topic to be conversational or barely functional, and then they move on.
Okay, so how is this different?
Well, the synthesis we see in this dialogue only works if the knowledge you are combining is exceptionally robust. Da Vinci didn't just casually observe a few muscles to get better at painting.
Oh, right, the dissection.
Yeah, to understand the human smile for the Mona Lisa, he engaged in illegal dissections. He was literally flaying the skin off cadavers by candlelight in hospital basements, just meticulously mapping the exact micromusculature of the human lip and cheek.
He went deeper into the subdiscipline of anatomy than the actual medical specialists of his era.
Exactly. So the requirement for this kind of polymathy isn't just a broad attention span. It's the willingness to dive to the absolute bottom of multiple distinct fields.
It's not knowing a little bit about everything. It's knowing a terrifying amount about a few key areas and then completely ignoring the walls between them.
And tearing down those walls requires an exhausting amount of cognitive energy. To sustain that level of deep cross-domain integration, you need an engine. You really need a fuel source that doesn't burn out when the complexity becomes overwhelming.
Which is where the script introduces the second major theme, relentless curiosity, but not the gentle, passive wonder we usually associate with that word.
Right, it's not just daydreaming.
No, in the context of this dialogue, curiosity is an aggressive, proactive tool. It is literally their primary biological and psychological shield against extreme catastrophic adversity.
We see this really clearly when the dialogue shifts to their shared experiences with catastrophic failure. They actually compare notes on things going horribly publicly wrong.
Which both of them have plenty of experience with.
Oh, absolutely. For Da Vinci, it was the Sforza horse. He spent years meticulously designing and modeling this massive 24-foot-tall equestrian statue in clay. It was meant to be his magnum opus.
And then what happened?
Well, before it could be cast in bronze, war broke out. The Duke of Milan took all the bronze set aside for Da Vinci's masterpiece and melted it down into cannons.
Oh, man.
And it gets worse. Then, invading French archers used Da Vinci's massive clay model for target practice, just completely destroying years of his life's work.
A completely devastating moment. And Musk matches that in the dialogue with the early days of SpaceX, Falcon 1, Flight 3, the rocket launches, and then during stage separation, there's a thrust transient.
Everything goes wrong.
Yeah, the rocket fails, destroying the payload and bringing the entire company within days of total bankruptcy. Millions of dollars, years of engineering just vaporized.
And when you encounter a severe setback on that scale, the natural human response is purely emotional, right? It is frustration, shame, or despair.
Oh, for sure.
The amygdala, the brain's threat detection center just fires up. Ego gets heavily involved. We feel like we have been personally defeated by the obstacle or humiliated by the universe.
We take it personally. Like, if the project I am leading tanks, I don't just feel like the project failed. I feel like I am a failure. My status is threatened.
But intense analytical curiosity bypasses that ego entirely. It is essentially a biological override.
How does that work?
Well, if a rocket engine explodes on the test stand and your immediate train reaction is fascinating, the telemetry data shows a pressure spike in the turbopump that shouldn't mathematically exist. Why did that happen?
Yeah.
You have immediately shifted the cognitive load.
You're moving the processing somewhere else.
Right. You are forcing blood flow to the prefrontal cortex to solve a highly technical puzzle.
So by activating the analytical part of the brain to ask why something exploded, you're literally starving the amygdala of the oxygen it needs to panic.
You cannot be in a state of sheer identity-crushing panic and deeply analytically curious at the exact same time. The brain simply doesn't support it. Curiosity removes the personal vendetta from the failure.
That makes it objective.
Yeah. The failure simply becomes a reflection of an incomplete understanding of the physical system. Da Vinci didn't fall into a deep depression over his destroyed statue. He immediately became fascinated by the ballistics of the French cannons that replaced it.
Wait, really?
Yeah, he just started designing superior fortifications. The curiosity completely neutralized the devastation.
That reframing is incredible. Curiosity is a mechanical tool for emotional regulation. But, that biological shield is really only necessary if you are constantly putting yourself in positions where you should panic.
Which they do.
Exactly. And that's the thread that ties the entire back half of this imaginary dialogue together. They both engineer situations where failure isn't just possible, it is mathematically guaranteed. Extreme ambition requires extreme failure.
And this is where it clashes with us, right?
Mm.
Modern corporate and educational society operates on the exact opposite principle. We are heavily incentivized to optimize for a seamless, error-free trajectory.
Right. You are graded on not making mistakes.
You are promoted based on successful, predictable quarterly returns. But the polymathic framework views a lack of failure as a massive red flag.
Because it means you are not pushing hard enough.
It means you are not generating new data.
Right. It's less like a sculptor chipping away stone to find a perfect statue and more like a vaccine. You introduce a controlled failure, a dead or weakened version of the virus into the system.
That's a great way to look at it.
The body reacts. Sometimes you get a mild fever, but the immune system gathers the exact structural data it needs to build antibodies for the real thing. You engineer a small failure to buy the data required to survive the massive challenge.
Or, to use an engineering parallel directly from the script, it's destructive testing. You pressurize a carbon fiber tank until it violently ruptures and explodes.
You don't do that because you wanted the tank to fail.
No, you do it because the exact millisecond, the exact pressure load, and the exact millimeter where the composite shears, that gives you the absolute indisputable limit of the material.
Which you can't just guess.
Right. You cannot model that perfectly on a computer. The explosion is the data.
And Da Vinci applies this exact destructive testing to his art. The script points out how many paintings Da Vinci simply abandoned. The Adoration of the Magi is a really famous example. It's just left completely unfinished.
And historically, critics called him easily distracted or undisciplined for that.
Right, but in the dialogue, Da Vinci explains that he didn't abandon it out of boredom. He had used the painting to solve a specific, incredibly complex problem regarding the mathematics of background perspective.
Once he figured out the math, the experiment was over.
He had the data. Finishing the painting would just be manual labor at that point. So the failure to finish the painting was actually a highly successful data-gathering operation.
By reclassifying failure from a moral judgment to a technical measurement, your tolerance for risk just expands exponentially.
It frees you up.
It really does. When you no longer view a broken prototype or an unfinished project as a strike against your personal worth, you become incredibly dangerous to the status quo.
Because you aren't terrified of looking foolish in a field where you weren't the traditional expert.
Exactly. You can walk into an aerospace facility as a software guy, or you can walk into a morgue as a painter because you aren't afraid of asking the wrong questions.
I want you, listening right now, to apply this directly to a recent failure you've had. Maybe it was a project proposal that was rejected, a marketing campaign that tanked, or even just a personal habit you tried to build and completely dropped after 2 weeks.
We all have them.
Oh, constantly.
Yeah.
And our instinct is to sweep it under the rug, hide it from the boss, or just feel guilty about it. But if we run it through this Da Vinci Musk blueprint, the question isn't how do I hide this mistake?
Right.
The question is, what specific piece of structural data did this failure just give me that I could not have learned any other way?
Did the marketing campaign fail because the audience is wrong? Or did the failure just give you the exact metric you needed to realize your pricing model is fundamentally misaligned with the commodity value of your service?
You ran a destructive test.
Now you have the telemetry.
So, synthesizing everything we've just pulled from this wild collision of the Renaissance and the modern era, we are looking at a very specific three-part blueprint for high-level problem solving.
Break it down for us.
First, you have to tear down the walls between subjects. Find the underlying mechanics of your problem and look for where those same mechanics exist in a completely different industry.
Like the river and the heart.
Exactly. Second, use aggressive curiosity to starve your panic response. When the prototype breaks, shift immediately into asking why to bypass your ego. And third, treat failure as a crucial data-gathering mechanism, a controlled vaccine rather than a personal defeat.
And the true beauty of this framework is its accessibility. You don't need $1 billion in capital, and you don't need a wealthy patron in Florence to start applying it.
Anyone can do it.
It begins with simply auditing your own daily inputs. If you work in tech, stop reading exclusively tech blogs. Read about mycology or urban planning or Renaissance architecture. You have to feed the brain diverse, robust data sets if you ever want it to synthesize something truly original.
The mechanics of solving impossible problems haven't changed in 500 years. Only the tools have. The underlying physics of human ambition are exactly the same.
It is a profound reminder that the most complex systems in the world, whether it's the human cardiovascular system or a rocket engine, they are still bound by fundamental truths that anyone can learn to observe.
So as you go back to your desk or finish your drive, I want to leave you with a final lingering thought to really mull over.
Let's hear it.
If these two incredible minds genuinely believe that synthesizing knowledge across completely unrelated fields is the ultimate key to solving humanity's greatest challenges, you have to ask yourself, what completely unrelated field or weird hobby or random subject outside of your day job holds the exact secret you need to solve your biggest problem right now?